Hello, 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 each and every last one of you beautiful motherfuckers out there listening and looking and watching. My name is Devanin, and this is the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. Hallelujah, tabernacle, and praise. I've got with me the very sexy Erik DaRosa and the very masculindo and freaky deaky Marc Fernandes, and they host the From Survivor to Thriver podcast. How the fuck are you gentlemen doing today?
Happy fucking Friday morning.
And happy fucking Friday.
Jazzed, got my coffee, feeling sexy. I'm not going to say one way or another. I may have some down under apparel on. Quick plug for you. Love it. How are you doing, Marc?
I'm great. I did think about the fact that it was called the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast and wondered if I should do some drugs, but then I remembered you and I actually have a podcast recording later today.
Yes.
And I'm shocked. I've got like 4 things. So I was like, oh, I guess it'll just be sex and Jesus. We can talk about it though.
You can show the drugs that you have. I love how Devanin has that little lilt on Jesus, the way he says it.
Well, that's
his podcast. Yeah,
that's sexy Southern Christian speak, and that's what you do. It's like, wait, I'm the host. You guys shut the fuck up.
Now we gotta let go and let flow, baby. So we will. I'm not the dominating one. I like to be controlled and stuff like that. So if you two masculine men want to have your way with me again, like you did before, then I'm not gonna stop you. Just cut into my show. I have no ego in this game.
Is that the definition of a power bottom?
Pretty much.
Okay.
And Marc's the bear. I mean, for people watching,
I'm not hairy enough. Like, and most of my hair is from the neck up. Like, see, that's all I got on my chest. I'm not. It's weird. Like, I'm real bare from like here up.
Look, I'm completely.
No, you are the definition of.
I'm completely shaved from the face all the way down to my toes. It started for biking and then just took on a life of its own.
That's what he says. It's funny. I heard you talking about like me as a freaky deaky, and I saw a very funny TikTok the other day. Erik and I have recently started a TikTok channel From Survivor to Thriver, and we suck at it. So I've been trying to like do research to get better at it. And for whatever reason, I must have watched something, and so I'm getting a ton of like swing talk is a huge thing, right? There's all these like people in the lifestyle, and this chick got on there, and she was like, there's that moment when you always thought you were a freak, and then you meet somebody who's really a freak. And then it's like, fuck. And I was thinking about it. I was like, yeah, I've always thought of myself as kind of freaky. And I'm like, I'm probably more vanilla than I, think I am. Aren't we all in some ways?
Well, I like to lick vanilla. So
there you go.
And chocolate, I'm guessing.
Lately, but I was more like mocha vanilla for a really, really long time. My current boyfriend is very black and very Trinidadian, but I grew up out west, and all I had was the Latinos and the white boys primarily, and so.
And if we're gonna be honest, you are like latte. You're not even quite mocha. You're latte. You're a latte there. Beautiful skin color, but I'd put you like I'm looking at mine. Yeah, and you're like a triple shot latte. This is a double shot.
So you're saying we could order Devanin at Starbucks if we wanted?
It'd be constantly.
Yes. Well, I mean, shit. Like that stuff's expensive anyway. It's like, are you tall, grande, or venti? Though that would be the question.
Venti all the way if I'm going to bother with it. Years. I kicked my Starbucks addiction. I used to be there all the time. So let me see. I want to give a shout out to Podmatch though, because that's how I met Erik and Marc. Podmatch.com. I talk about it all the time. I just had Alex Sanfilippo on, who is the creator of Podmatch. He was my honorary guest for my 50th episode, which came out yesterday. And I met these two handsome devils here through Podmatch. And so Podmatch is making great lasting connections because I feel like I'm going to be friends with these guys for the rest of my life. And I have Podmatch to thank for that. So God bless you, Alex and Filippo, wherever your beautiful ass is out there in the world today. And so I want to read a quote from y'all's profile on Podmatch, which I feel like really hits at the epicenter and the heart of why you do your podcast. Y'all's podcast is very mental health focused. I pretty much say that's pretty much the reason why you do it. And so you say, and I quote, Stigma says we shouldn't talk openly about these things. I say we should. Stigma also says we shouldn't stand high up on the mountaintop, vulnerable and transparent for the entire world to see. I say we must. End quote. What would you guys like to say about that?
So I guess Marc's pointing to me. I'm going to take so that quote, just to give a little backstory on the podcast, the whole podcast started. I get off of a plane. I had been sunbathing on the island of Maui back in November of 2020 during the pandemic, landed back in Colorado, looked up at a couple of the mountains around our house and saw all the snow and thought, shit, this ski season isn't going to be like any ski season we've had before. The last one ended really strange, and I don't even know what this one's going to look like. And so I got home and didn't really sleep well for a few nights, was kind of going through my own funk. And I wrote what I wanted to be a blog piece. And in that blog piece, I wrote down at the sort of the end of it, that quote that you just read. And when I few weeks later, went over to Marc's house. We were hanging out around his kitchen island where all of our great conversations tend to take place, especially pre-COVID. Marc's house, the kitchen and dining room were always a place where lots of us gathered and hung out. And it was a really fun place to just catch up and exchange ideas. And so when I wrote that, which eventually then turned into the idea for the podcast, it really is about, standing up on top of a mountain. Here we are in Colorado, and screaming at the top of our lungs, like, you're not alone. I'm just like you, broadcasting in essence to the world. With my tagline, it's perfectly okay to not always be okay. Rather than, if I think of the juxtaposition kind of hanging out down on the valley floor and whispering about mental health issues like we're used to with cancer and the AIDS epidemic, and people living in silence and struggling in silence. So that's really kind of the genesis of where that whole thing came from.
You're fucking right about that. Cause when I got HIV, I didn't know anyone who I could reach out to. I felt like had it already. And so that's a huge reason why I'm super transparent too, because sometimes I wonder if when I got HIV, I would have known anyone else who had it if I wouldn't have felt like I was the only one and I was going to like shrivel up and die in 8 months.
And I feel like, if you look back at it, it's running a similar course to that, right? Like HIV only happened to people that were gay or with an alternative lifestyle in the early 80s, right? And then all of a sudden, Magic Johnson comes out and he's like, yeah, I lay a ton of pipe and it's ladies and I'm HIV positive, right? That's what happened. And then all of a sudden it's kind of normalized. But I do think I've always sort of pushed more to the cancer side of that metaphor only because of this. It is this silent, understood killer. Where like when HIV first came out, like people didn't even know what it was, right? Like as a matter of fact, I feel like we could talk to a bunch of people who wouldn't even still understand the difference between HIV positive and having full-blown AIDS, right? Like they wouldn't be able to kind of manufacture or understand that for us for the treaties. And the mental health and cancer thing, when you start to talk to people, they actually know way more about it than you would think. Like people are like, oh yeah, there's depression, there's anxiety, there's bipolar, and there's all these like little slices of it. Just like people know, they're like, oh, you've got this kind of cancer. Oh, with some treatment, it'll suck, but you'll probably be okay. And it's like, those are the kinds of conversations I want to have about mental health. And it's not that the HIV AIDS metaphor for it and sort of simile isn't accurate, but I've always gone to this physical versus mental thing. I probably even mentioned that in your episode today. And I'm like, we should talk about this like a twisted ankle or a hurt knee. Like I have to go to the doctor. I need to talk to some people. I have to put a team around me. Like everyone would be like, oh yeah, I have a physical therapy appointment, right? No one's going to like hide that. It's like, no, I'm going to see my therapist today. today's going to be an easy visit. I'm actually feeling great. I might ask her about something or he about something completely random versus trying to like, get to the depth of something. And it's like, that should okay.
We have a lot of governments and media to blame for that stigma because the way it was marketed and put out there didn't help. The
Yeah,
religious
for sure. Right. Yep. You're right.
the religious judgment that came along with it targeted towards the non-straight community didn't help. But
Yep.
people shriveled up people in Africa with flies all around them saying, this is what AIDS looks like.
Yeah. You're absolutely fucking right.
Yeah.
I mean, or straight up, just literally like, no, like gay people get that. Right. Like, it wasn't fair to him in some ways, even though I appreciate he was being such a dick to Joe Rogan. But the quote that came out that Neil Young recently, talked about, going to a grocery store and having a cashier with AIDS and not wanting that around him. It's like, as shitty as that is, it's like he was essentially responding to, in often ways, the temperature and sort of the thought process of the time, which, by the way, like could not have been more accurate. I think I've actually shared it on the podcast before. My godfather, you want to talk about sex, drugs, Jesus. I had a gay Catholic godfather, and he unfortunately contracted HIV through a blood transfusion because he was being treated for cancer. And so everyone always assumed, because of when he contracted HIV, that it was absolutely through sexual transmission, and it wasn't.
Well, people have a tendency to be fucking stupid.
Well, and look at
Amen.
they're doing the same shit now with TV commercials for medications, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's funny you said that. Like, one came up last night. I was watching the hockey game, and it was the one where, like, if I'm being really ignorant, but there is a drug that you can take, and sometimes it causes like involuntary body movements to treat depression. And so then you take another drug.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but you'll be perfectly okay after you do it. It's like,
And also all these commercials that are talking about specifically like antidepressants, right?
well, no, I was going to talk about like,
and the commercial starts with somebody, like you were saying, like shriveled up, right? So they're shriveled up on the couch. There's always a cloud above them. It's raining, and sometimes they'll have them walking around, and the cloud follows them with rain, right? Which let's just like put the stigma on top of the stigma on top of the stigma. And then, you see the whole family around, they're kind of walking on eggshells. And then the person takes the medication and like overnight, suddenly the whole family is reunited. The sun comes out, and it's all glitter and fucking unicorns and rainbows. And both the beginning of that commercial and the end of the commercial could not, the frowning emoji. Yes, Mark.
well, that's the one.
Yeah.
Can we actually see that? Because my light is like not in the better place. That was the commercial I was watching last night. It's got this fucking frowning. There we go.
There it is.
And it's like, and here I was hiding behind my depression. This is not what depression always looks like.
No,
It's just not.
there's a thing called smiling depression. We've had it on our show. Like
I suffer from it.
yes,
And like no one would ever demanded. You're pretty like, met me a few times now. Your first thought process is like, that motherfucker's depressed, right? No, I don't walk around like that. And it's the quiet moments, it's the moments by myself. It's, you know what I mean? Like the biggest sort of facade about it is the facade, right? Like, people wear masks. We all do all the time. And I think, shit, you talk about like the government and religious perspectives, at the wrong time in history, you'd end up having like an exorcism, acted upon you because you were bipolar. They're like, yeah, well, that motherfucker's obviously possessed, and it's like, wait, no, that's not what's going on. Jesus, can we please treat this like what it is, just an illness?
But basically what y'all are calling for is just simply more understanding, open-mindedness, and love.
yeah, no, exactly.
Sure.
I think with anything in life, right? The more people start to have conversations about taboo, stigmatized subjects, right? And it's a big problem we have in this country right now. Everybody's going to be on one side or another. And we're not going to go down the politics road, but whatever happened to people sitting around a table, and that's what we like to call our podcast, right? These kitchen table conversations. Whatever happened to people sitting around a table and exchanging ideas? I'm thinking like back when I was in undergrad, right? There was a time you actually went to school, you didn't have all the answers. Sometimes you said some things that were fucked up, but nobody like was going to cancel you for it, right? Somebody would say, "Hey, let me explain that to you. Let's talk about that a little more. You have a misunderstanding there." And through those conversations, you start to learn more and you become more of a community. But that's not where we're at right now. Everybody has to have one side or another. And if you don't agree with the other person's side, like you're wrong, you can't possibly be right. And that's a big part of what's happening in the mental health world right now as well.
It's not even just that, Eric. It's you're wrong and you're evil because of it, right? Like
Yeah.
there's that extra layer of judgment. And I think to me, that's what's so polarizing and that's what makes it almost impossible to find consensus or common ground. Like you can't just accept, like, you can't use the statement like we agree to disagree and then we move on and be friends about it. Or, hey, I truly think you're wrong. Here's why, but okay, whatever, right? And instead of, it's like, hey, you're wrong and you're evil and you're infringing on my rights because of it, because you said something I don't like. It's like, whoa. Like, first off, if you actually have a deep conversation with like 99.9% of the humans, you will find out that you probably agree with them on more things than you disagree. Like that's just the human spirit, right? Like you know, what you said to Brandon is so accurate. And I'm going to butcher your quote, but you were saying, we're looking for a little bit more understanding, compassion, and love in the world. And who isn't? Like, who isn't? Like, that's, you think about some of the hottest debates out there. And when I say hot, I don't mean like in a good way. I mean like hot, fiery, you know, you- and we don't have to get into the political aspect of it, but I'm just talking about it from a metaphorical standpoint. Roe versus Wade and women's rights and the right to choose is on the forefront right now. But if you actually listen to both sides of the argument, it's like there's stuff in both of those, like science hasn't quite sorted out when s- nobody should be telling a woman what to do with their body. And when you listen to the arguments, it's like, shit, there's a reason why this has been debated, for time immemorial, and some of it's power. I'm not going to say that there are not bizarre and weird parts of elements of both sides of the argument as well. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, no, like these people have beliefs, core beliefs and things that you're like, if you think about it with just an iota of, like taking your own thoughts or feelings out of it, you're like, yeah, I see why there's an argument here. But admitting that or saying that, you're automatically in some way sort of alienating yourself from whatever side of that argument that person's on, because you're like, oh, well, you just don't have an opinion then, I guess.
I like the option to not have an opinion. And it's one that I try to speak often, is that, we don't have to have an opinion about every damn thing. Sometimes just to behold and take in something and not have an opinion one way or the other for good or bad is the choice. So if a woman wants to get an abortion, you don't have to give a fuck one way or the other. Like you don't have to care.
I'll be honest, I don't have a uterus, so I feel like I should kind of shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And
Amen on that. Not my day.
right, and I get it, you know what I mean, and it's such a unique sort of thing in there, and that's why I was saying it's not that argument, so to speak, that I want to key into, but it's one that is so polarized, and it's very difficult. I'm thinking about a conversation I had recently, and it's like, well, can't I have an opinion that somehow sits like near the middle? Which, by the way, most people do, right? Like when you really start digging down into what people think or believe, it's rarely as black and white as an opening statement sounds.
But also, I want to come back to something Davana just said, and that's that whole idea about, you know, I don't always want to have an opinion. And I think that's one of the fundamental problems that we as humans are going through and have been going through for centuries is this two-part issue of people don't listen and people immediately form a judgment. And so that's that whole opinion piece. Rather than just sitting and listening to what somebody has to say and maybe learning something or just finding out something that you might not have known before, and then going on to another part of the conversation, as somebody starts to speak, that other person is immediately forming a judgment and is immediately thinking about how they're going to, whatever the rebuttal is going to be to what that person just said. And from that point on, they've completely tuned them out and haven't heard the rest of the conversation. And we're in that in many ways in the mental health world. And we talk so much on the show about not passing judgment. Sometimes you just have to be there for somebody and listen to what they're going through, right? The biggest thing that you can do for somebody who's going through a crisis is to sit and listen. Don't form a judgment, don't form an opinion, and certainly don't try to solve the problem for them. And I think that then extends out into all of these things that we've been talking about, which could make us a much better society as a whole.
Well, people love to say it, right? I know exactly how you feel. And it's like in that moment, and I'm going to challenge us all, fucking stop saying that because
Because no
in
one
that,
does.
A, no one does. And B, at that moment, you've essentially cut the legs right out from under the person trying to tell you something that they truly feel. Because the fact of the matter is, you could say something, let me give you some suggestions instead of just taking away what you said. You're like, I felt something like that before. I want to hear why you feel. When did you first start feeling this way? Oh, that sounds really challenging. Have you thought about things that might help you with that? Okay, so those are all the things that would be way more productive and more helpful, more loving, and you might actually fucking learn something from when you might be going through something like this. When the person looks at you and says, I actually feel a lot better if I spend 5 minutes in a quiet room by myself in the morning, or meditate, or go for a hike, or pet my dog, or, let my cat scratch, whatever, like it doesn't matter. Or whatever it is. And I think that openness, I love, Devane, what you had said earlier about that, because I wish it was as simple as like, oh yeah, we just need a little bit more openness and love in the world, because it is. But unfortunately, the steps to that, there seems to be way too many barriers in the way half the time that we've all put up.
And true that. I want to get a little bit combative and with you had said something about like not being friends when you were talking about like the opposing opinions people draw. So, and I can't remember exactly how you said what you said, but the thought
Well,
of
it's people automatically move to like, oh, we disagree, so I have to hate you now.
to an extent, yes, but not so to the extent of self-preservation. So like I will not be friends with somebody who has an anti-LGBTQIA mindset because people do things to hurt people in my community.
I,
It
I
also,
totally get it.
and also I don't want to be around negative energy. And so like I don't go to churches at all anymore, but but specifically I wouldn't go to a church that preaches against homosexuality. I wouldn't and I like to tell people to stop doing that and stop rationalizing the little things that churches and different people and groups of friends say and say, okay, well, that's just one thing. I'll just focus on all the good stuff. But that one thing should be a deal breaker, because we hurt ourselves if we go and sit and listen to a preacher tell us we're wrong. We hurt ourselves if we're around a group of people who they're like, well, we don't hate you, we hate the sin, or it's not me who's saying that you're wrong. It says it right here in the Bible. All of that is harmful to us. So to the extent of self-preservation, I want people to stop associating and hanging out with people who disagree with your lifestyle or something that you are about, especially when you're not actively trying to hurt them. Because it is not okay for me for people to draw conclusions about other people. That's not the point of we live to improve ourselves, not to find out what's wrong with other people. And so I say get away from the crazy motherfuckers. So I don't bucks with people like that. Anybody who I find out either voted for Trump, has an anti-LGBTQIA plus community, I mean shit, not community, like opinion, cut off, bitch. Now, if you want to buy some shit from my store, I'm not going to turn you away because I don't have to like you to take your money. I learned that when I was selling meth from my fucking drug supplier, my meth cook. And, you know, emotions ain't got nothing to do with finances and vice versa. But you can't be in my personal life and you got to get the fuck away. Give me your money, take your product and go.
I get that. And the thing, I guess I was thinking more of like the theoretical and sort of like argument decisions where, people, and it happens in families and friends. And I guess the difference for me though, and I want to say this first, David, I absolutely agree with you. Like if they're coming for you, get the fuck away or make the decision that, that's the hill you're going to die on, so to speak. And, and I think for lack of a better way of looking at it, that's where From Survivor to Thriver sort of came up. And it's why Erik has shared his story the way he has and why I've shared parts of my story the way I have. And I've been very open about the fact that the reason why I haven't shared my whole story is because of how many other people it involves. I'm the child of long-term family trauma, unfortunately. And I don't, at this point in my life, preserving some of those other relationships and allowing that to continue is more important versus where you are, Devana, which I totally can see myself getting to. And it's kind of where Erik is. It's like, you motherfuckers came for me. So you can go stand over there in the corner and I'm going to build a brick wall. And I see absolute value and power and love in both of those. Right. And the fact of the matter is, Devan, you won't let them into your personal life, but you're still, with the way you live and the way you speak and the people you associate with, are still trying to change their minds without letting them into your life, which is like double power, right? You're like, no, 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 no. I'm going to show you that this is human and this is life. But no, 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 you can't come have this fucking dicks.
Yeah. Yeah, if they ever want to actually catch a conscience and get over themselves and change and become open-minded and stop being a judgmental hoe, well then sure, but they still won't have access to me.
Absolutely. And they should.
Right. I'm not actively trying to change their minds, but if it happens as a byproduct, I'm open to that. Energetically, I'm open to that possibility.
It's amazing what sexy underwear will do to people's minds, right?
It all boils down to the mind. But you're not completely like a closed book, Mark. You've given me a couple of things about yourself that you like to talk about, or at least would be willing to. Particularly, believe it was you who was like, you coming from a Catholic background.
I'm a recovering Catholic.
You're a recovering Catholic, and everyone who listens to my show knows I cannot stand the Catholic Church. And stand it. So I think everyone should watch on HBO Max the young Pope and the new Pope with, I can't remember, with Jude Law's fine.
Yeah.
Plays the Pope on there.
Let's just say, are you watching that for the actual program, or are you watching it for Jude Law? Let's be honest.
Oh,
I'm also very open. I am not into dick, but he is a beautiful man. He is. He is a sexy beast. The thing about being a recovering Catholic is there are two things right now that are interesting to me. The first thing is this new Pope actually gives me hope that organized religion can actually adapt and change to a world, right? And do I think it's actually going to happen in the long run? No, because I think some very, there are very distinct sects within that organization. Sects, SECTS, which, my New England accent messed with you. Sects, not sex, or as the TikTokers would say, segs, right? SEGGS. But no, so there's always like a swing within that organization. And I call it an organization because that's always been my problem with organized religion sort of to itself. Like, I understand spirituality. I understand, if you read about Jesus, you're like, yeah, he's a great dude, man. Like, these teachings and philosophies are something we can all live better lives by embracing. But then you add the human element of the bureaucracy and the protection of power around it. And I got kicked out of my confirmation class. I made the mistake of challenging a priest who said that my parents needed to be present at a confirmation class with me to prove that they, approved what I was doing. And I reminded him that I was pretty sure that my confirmation was a contract between me and God and no one else. And that went over like the proverbial fart in church, believe it or not. And I was asked to leave. So yeah, they can
But
fuck right off.
you dared. I agree with that. Churches can fuck right off by and large. So basically, you attempted to do the one thing they would hate for you to do is to remove them from the equation and just get back to you and God.
Correct. Which is like what they tell you, right? They're like, your relationship is with God. This is the house of God. The God lives everywhere. Like literally, like, and as someone who isn't religious in their life at all now, like, you want to talk scripture, I can talk scripture. It was like the last time I remembered reading the Bible, he said, look not for me in my house, but look for me in the mountains and the sky and the streams. And yeah, they asked me to leave. So
I'm
okay.
looking at the mountains right now.
Well, but see, it's one of the things that I've always appreciated about Judaism and the Jewish religion is that it is actually the conversations you would often have with a rabbi. And now, look, every organization could have its own fallacies, but most rabbis are just interested in hearing what your relationship with God is. They don't necessarily want to tell you what it is. And I know there are pluses and minuses to all things, but that it's one of the things that I've always appreciated about most of the people that I know that are devout and are Jewish in that way.
All right, you want to go down the pathway of Judaism though, because you
Yeah.
got me. Yeah, you got me on. So let's talk about a religion where, gosh, what am I? 5 days old. Okay, I'm stripped, buck fucking naked. I'm on a table in front of like.
By the way, Demand is looking at you right
Yeah.
now, like he's very excited about
I know,
what happened next.
family and friends while they chomp on bagels and lox, right? While some guy with a beard, like down to his knees, takes a knife and takes off my foreskin. What kind of a fucking religion is that? Okay, because that's still going on right now.
I feel like as somebody who was circumcised in the hospital, like moments after I was born, I feel like the bigger issue is not being able to eat shrimp or lobster, just to be honest.
Wait,
Get the bed and
wait, Eric, your circumcision really happened like this, or were you like kind of fucking?
Oh no, that's legit, dude.
oh no, that's legit.
It's not a doctor. It's a moil. It's just some fucking dude who knows how to draw it.
It's a moil, yes. So when you get off this show, Devan, you gotta look this up. But yeah,
He
it
just
is a.
blew his fucking.
So that's exactly what happens for a Jewish male when they're
Throw a
born.
party.
They throw a party
while you're running the theater.
They take like some sort of whiskey or something and they rub it on the baby's gums, and you're on a table as your parents are watching some guy, right, who calls himself a Mormon, and he is there with a knife, and off comes the foreskin. The baby starts screaming, gets carried to another room, and
everybody's screaming Mazel Tov.
Mazel Tov, and the bagels and lox continue. So Judaism starts at about 5 days old. So all religions have. I'm watching the video.
I have to ask this question because as someone who's not Jewish, I do know a lot about the traditions, and I've actually been present. But when is there because I know they often have a naming ceremony as well. Like timing wise, do you have your name before your dick gets trimmed, or does that happen after?
As you know, I'm not a very practicing Jew anymore, and I'm not totally sure, but I know the circumcision needs to be within 7 days. I'm pretty sure it's 7 days.
Yeah.
Somebody out there's gonna probably call me on it, but I think it's 7 days. I'm not sure. He's starting to scratch himself.
I think
he's really.
He's like, oh shit, now I'm uncomfortable.
oh no, I'm not uncomfortable, but I thank God for Jesus and for the fact that we do not have to do all of that anymore. So I mean, if that's truly their tradition, I respect whatever it is that they wanted to do if they felt like that's what they wanted to do. But the whole point of Jesus is that we don't have to live by that old code anymore, and we can eat our fucking lobster and whatever part of the hoof and whatever else we want to. You know, we don't have all of those laws and restrictions, and for God's sakes, we have hospitals if somebody wants to get circumcised.
And again, like every religion, right? There's in Judaism, there's Orthodox, right? And Shomer Shabbos, like there's all sorts of like the people that fall into different categories of Orthodox Judaism. Then there's conservative, which I would say is, middle ground. And
It's
then,
the Catholic of
yes.
the
And then there's,
Judaism.
and so different people are brought up different ways. And for me, I'm not sure if I've even gone into it much on the show, but my grandmother, my mother's mother, was Orthodox. And so I went to Orthodox temple growing up. And so, for my bar mitzvah, I did the entire Saturday service and things like that. And she died when I was 10. And so that was one bond that we had together. I would go to Saturday services with her, and then we'd go have lunch, and then we'd go bowling. And then when she passed away, I feel like religion for me really fell off the map. She was the one who kind of brought that into my life. It wasn't something that, I hate to use the word my parents, and I'm not going to use their real names on this show, but the people who gave birth to me never really followed through with any pieces and parts of Judaism throughout, my teenage years. And then I go and I marry, a wonderful woman from Great Neck, Long Island. And so kind of rekindled a bit of I would say, kind of the social side of Judaism, but not necessarily the spiritual side.
Well, and the thing that you bring up there, which I think is super important, and is the connection to family and community. And I think it's, if we were going to talk about like what a secular life is missing, it can be that, right? Like if you think about, especially coming out of the pandemic, a lot of people have lost their social networks, this web of people, by not having had contact with them and not being able to reproduce it. And, when I think about the people in my family that religion was so important to, that church family was a part of the larger family and that connection. And having been really close to my grandmothers, I have actually two great grandmothers that lived until I was a teenager, and I was very close with both of them. And religion was one of the things that we connected on. And one of the difficult things was one of my grandmothers did not understand my argument with the church. It made no sense to her because she was like, "You're a child, like do what you're told." And I was like, "Well, that's cute, but the way the Bible's written at 13, I become an adult in the minds of the church, so I can't do it that way." Like it did, and those of you that know me, I'm such a stubborn and sort of literal person in that way. Eric's over there like, "Oh, I don't know what to say next."
So
But
I'm a stubborn asshole at times. How's that?
sure, yeah,
Okay, good.
I prefer prick, but yeah, asshole's okay too. No, and
In a loving way.
in a loving way. But you lose the power and the connection of that when it's toxic, right? Like Savannah, and I think about your story, essentially you got ostracized by your family. Those people were your family. The deep connection you had with those kids that you were working with, and the staff you were working with, that family, and they were basically like, "Oh, actually, you're a sinner, get the fuck out." It's like, wait, I thought we were all sinners in the eyes of the Lord and we all deserve forgiveness and love. No? Oh, well, fuck you then. you know?
But for Devannon, I blame the evil MySpace.
I forget about that part. The evil MySpace.
Yeah.
And I think it's still there. If you search, is it even still there anywhere? Can you find it?
I don't know, but at some point we got to take that picture and we've got to juxtapose it against our friend Marc, his photo, which sometimes makes the rounds in some of our group settings, and maybe we'll send it to Devannon too, just as a little teaser.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Devannon, we've completely hijacked your shit. Is there something you wanted to talk about or ask us?
I like how Larry King used to conduct his Larry King Live. His philosophy was to always let the guest talk more than him. Each show is different. Sometimes I probably talk a little just as much as the guest, and today is not one of those days, and I feel like that's exactly what it should be. So so we will let this flow in the way it should flow, and everything that y'all have said is polarizing, you know, to the degree that I think that is going to help a lot of people. The last thing I want to say about the church, and y'all are talking about Lakewood Church, Houston, Texas, Joel Osteen Ministries, where I received my biggest church trauma at. I just, I wish that people would have a stronger connection with God and not be so much into rituals, into church personalities, into churches, into priests, into different things like that. The most heartbreaking thing that I heard coming out of this whole Ukrainian crisis, I was listening to, I think, the Morning Joe show on MSNBC, and there was this lady saying like she's not a this Ukrainian woman saying like she's not afraid to die. She's just afraid to die because she hadn't had a chance to make it to the priest to confess. And and I thought, you know, she's super brave, you know, but the whole point of Jesus was that you don't have to go through somebody anymore to get forgiveness. You can just simply ask for it wherever you're at. This hurdle, the hurdles the Catholic Church in particular, I think they're the biggest perpetrators of this. And then all denominations want to put a man back in between you and God. And I agree with Mark. We don't need him. It's just us and Jesus. We don't have to have these people. And I just thought that was so sad. You're brave enough to go fight Russia and die, but you fear for your soul because you don't have a chance to go confess to some man in a booth.
But isn't that where we are with all these stigmas, right? It's like, and that's why I know Devan and you have your show, Mark and I have our show. It's this whole idea about, people are afraid to talk, and they're afraid to talk, and they're afraid of the judgment that might come from it. So in the instance of the Catholic Church, right, there's somebody that's sitting on the other side of I've never done it. I've only visited some churches, but
I can tell you all about it.
yep. Somebody's sitting on the other side and you're telling them all of the things, right, that are supposedly sins so you can confess so you can feel better. Well, what happened to, just talking about it? Like me talking to you or me talking to Mark or me just kind of being at peace with it myself. Why does it have to be through some middleman who then can communicate to somebody else?
Well, there's two things. I'm going to answer your question.
Okay.
Imagine that. I usually don't.
You
I usually don't. The first thing is, and I don't think we can talk about this without bringing this up, and I'm not using this as an argument for it or against it, but it is what it is. There is a sense of the power of ritual, right? Like no matter what it is, and Erik, as someone who's suffered from OCD, you know more than anyone the unwielding, undeniable power of ritual. Whether it's how you count things, what you do, and so and I don't. And this is where I get weird because I will rail against organized religion, but then I'm like, but wait, I get it, right? Like the theater of it, the understanding, the power of sitting somewhere and telling someone else something you don't want to tell anyone, right? Like I can tell you for sure, as a child, I definitely said things in a confessional booth I would not have wanted to say to my mom, dad, brother, sister, friends. And then I would pray a bunch, which I never understood because the prayers and I still know them all absolutely by rote. I actually freaked my wife out the other day because said something about religion. She was like, yeah, well, what you put on. I was like, I could recite the Nicene Creed right now. Which she was like, really? I'm like, yep, the whole thing. And I was an altar boy for years. So I actually know a bunch of the prayers and stuff in Latin as well, because I went to an old school Roman Catholic church. But so power of ritual, I think it's important. And I don't think you can talk about that without at least an homage or an understanding of like, there is power in that. We feel that. The second bit of it is, and I think this is the crux of what Devanna was talking about is, and I think it actually leads to a lot of the mental health issues we can have nowadays, is there is such a lack of understanding and self-awareness and empathy within us all that we almost need someone else to kind of break through, right? Like we need someone to tell us that Jesus loves us because we don't love ourselves, so to speak. And I know that's a really oversimplified way of saying it, but I just can't help but think that that is part of the issue, right? And we are looking for this external validation, this external feel or, understanding of love because we're not willing. And there's no money in people loving themselves, right? Like you can't build an organization on it. You say you do, but you're like, yeah, but you have to come here once a week as the reminder. Don't forget to put that envelope in the donation basket.
I don't care for prescribed prayers like the scripts within the Catholic Church, and I guess other religions too, how they're telling you what to pray takes away the sincerity of just coming off of your heart and talking to God in a free flow conversation.
Absolutely debated, but that's the power of that ritual, right? It's the same reason why we like to chant at a sporting event. You know what I mean? Like, and I think, the theater of it, you can't, I don't think you can ignore it. Maybe it's because I'm an actor, but I really think that like shared community, singing a hymn together, right? Because to me, a hymn and a prayer are one and the same. One has an organ and one has a rhythm in the same words. It's the same shit.
No, I think it's all a trick, or at least a lot of it is a trick.
I don't disagree with that, but I'm saying that there is power in the trick.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. So if we had more love for ourselves and if our family units at home were stronger, then the church could not replace this for us. So if
Amen, brother.
so when people go and get into like gangs or like I did in the criminal underworld, we're seeking family and stuff like that. This here is an inherent indication of the fracture within us as people and as societies as a whole. Since we're all broken and shit, you know, we go out trying to get filled up. And I think the church is just as much of a drug as crystal meth and heroin or anything else. And I think people get addicted to the ritual you speak of without even realizing it. But because it's cute and it's acceptable, and you don't have a needle hanging out your arm with blood squirting on the windows, and they're not going to come get you and strap you to a stretcher and shit like that, like I've been, then it's accepted. It's an acceptable addiction. Church is an acceptable addiction. But I
Oh,
think,
and also I'm going to go back to what Mark talked about with OCD. I think there is a piece of it there, which for me, OCD one was about being able to control what I could control or thought I could control. But the other piece of it, OCD, the manifestation of it is so much about finding safety and security, right? And that was what it was for me. I felt like if I didn't do these things, something bad would happen. If I didn't do these things, the intrusive thoughts would continue. And I think there's an element in organized religion for some people, and whether it's been learned or whether it's been told to them, but they feel that there's a safety and security if they go to this place, right? To be around other people, to worship whoever it might be, whatever religion it might be. And if they don't do that, then something bad will happen. And I think that is the really dangerous side, Devan, into what you're speaking about in terms of, these organized religions is it, in some ways, they almost scare people into thinking if you don't practice this as we tell you, then, you're going to hell, right? All these other terrible things are going to happen to
Well,
mhm.
since this is called Sex, Drugs, and Jesus, I feel like we also need to invoke some rock and roll. And as I was listening to you talk, because, it's on my remarks, I was reminded of one of my favorite bands, Rage Against the Machine. And they have a song called Killing in the Name of, right? And it clearly attacks systemic racism. And there's probably a bunch of people who are going to hear this and be like, wow, I never really realized that's what the song was about. But the lyric is, those are them that work forces are those of them that burn crosses. Right? They repeat it a bunch of times. And I think that is where the disconnect is today. And I absolutely agree with you. It's like at some point or in some way, I hope or have the optimism that the people that get together and like, we are the church of blah, 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 had a true idyllic and idealistic and a need for community, no different than we do with you writing your book and hosting your podcast and us hosting the podcast and moving into hosting events and doing other things. But you start adding the layers and then it gets corrupted, so to speak, right? Now, I'm sure there are some organizations that were corrupt to begin with. If you think about the fact that, you know, the the beginnings of the Roman Catholic Church was essentially, you know, a Roman emperor going, okay, I'm Catholic now. We're going to adapt all these pagan rituals. You know, for those of you out there know, like there's no mention of the bunny in the Bible. So you can take your Easter bunny and go screw because that's what they were telling you to do. It's springtime. It's time to have the babies. And that's why the fucking bunny lays eggs, bitches. So, but I'm going to be in so much trouble. My mother's going to be like, why? Why did you have to get on fucking show and yell about pagan rituals of Catholicism?
And there is no Hanukkah Harry and there is no Hanukkah Bush, but I think
But there is Hanky the Christmas poo. I believe in Hanky the Christmas poo.
can we get to the sex part yet?
So, yeah, we can, because really that's the power and control of it, right? Like, you know, and it was actually a question. I can't believe I'm going to flip this on you, Devan. And like, you're the host. I'm going to ask you a question. Listening to you talk about the idea of like power, control, the corruption element of it, and then within the church, I wonder, do you think of or understand this idea of like, you talked about how our families are broken nowadays. I read a very interesting article the other day talking about how the nuclear family was a mistake, meaning, you know, the idea that there's a mom and dad and kids, and like that's the nuclear family, you know, focus on the family, all that shit. And then it essentially made life much easier for the kids because we've pointed fingers at the mom and dad and say, this is what you guys are supposed to be doing, right? So if it works well, the kids essentially become the center of it. I don't know about your background, David, but I know for Eric and I growing up, where we grew up and knowing a bit about him and his family, it wasn't just about our mom and dad. There were aunts, uncles, grandmothers. Like there was this village that raised us as kids. Like I could point to so many seminal moments from other members of our family, or even some of my mom and dad's close friends who were really more like aunts and uncles versus just my mom and dad. And I wonder, from a community standpoint, as the family has gotten sort of smaller, right? Like it's not as like, think of how many parents raise kids now and they're not even near their parents or this or that. But I wonder if that's some of the breakdown, but it also makes people search out and seek out that community and family in different ways. Like, I mean, have you thought about that? Does that make sense to you in that way?
It does, because we seek community whether we realize it or not. And so, which is something I didn't realize, and I got kicked out of Lakewood because I went and subconsciously sought community out in the streets where I knew I wouldn't be judged at, like in nightclubs and in drug houses. And so, but I didn't realize that's what I was doing. And so absolutely, we always are going to find some sort of tribe. I found like a sense of family through gaming, you know, through playing live action role player games and stuff like that, because you can talk to people and stuff in real time through the games. You know, that's something that really sustained me through the pandemic. And so we go and seek it. But just like with all things, I think we can take anything too far. How much fucking family do you really need? You only you only need 2 or 3 motherfuckers in your corner. You don't need the whole damn village. There's not that many people like your ass anyway. Not that you're not lovable and likable, but people have their own insecurities and shit going on. And you're gonna have a whole lot of enemies in this life. So the higher you go, you have to tighten the reins around you. So I don't think the thing is going out trying to get as many friends and as many people close to you as you can. Just get a few good relationships and cultivate those, you know, rather than becoming addicted to family. I think people are addicted to family too. And the concept of family, to the extent that they will not let them go, even if they become abusive. People are way too into family. Anything.
Yeah.
Now
I never, not let them go. I've never understood the like blood is thicker than water element because you know, I don't know if I don't remember, Devan, if we mentioned it. I'm pretty sure we did. Yeah, we did for sure. You know, talking this idea of like chosen family and how important that is at finding, as you just said, quote, those motherfuckers in your corner, like really in your corner. But I think the other piece of it is it's like anything else when it comes down to this stigma or this idea. It's like, unfortunately, we are sort of products of what we've been told if we allow ourselves to believe it. We're like, no, this is important. I have to do this. I have to, you know, rectify this. And it's like, not if it's killing you. You know, I think back to your statement earlier. You're like, if they're coming for me, then no, they don't get to come here. They don't get to be with this. They don't get to, you know, be there. And even if exactly, and even if it is your family, I mean, look, that's hard. I get it. And I'm not suggesting you now go over every relationship you have with a fine-tooth comb and be like, you motherfuckers are out. It's going to be like, the area of grievances in Seinfeld. I've got a lot of problems with all of you. But if it's truly harmful, yeah, you got to cut that shit out. You got to let it go.
And so I want to encourage people, like you were mentioning the truth, like where the fucking Easter bunny comes from. I was thinking about that the other day. So y'all, you go to church generally because your parents told you to. You go on Easter egg hunts because your parents or somebody told you to. But, have you ever really thought, where did this fucking bunny come from? What the hell is a Cadbury egg? Why are we coloring these fucking eggs? Different holidays come around. What the fuck do all of these different things have to do with it? Where did it really come from?
Best part is it's not even a leap. You're like, wait, eggs and rabbits. What are they?
Because rabbits
Fertility?
don't lay eggs. Rabbits-
Well, no, but the egg,
But both are delicious.
Both are delicious.
Eggs are delicious.
and they're both about fertility. Like, and I mean, that's the thing. Like, when you think about these pagan rituals, like, it's so simple. I love the fact that you're talking about like burning the Yule log. It's like, yeah, you know why they did that? Because it's fucking cold. It's like, it's not even that hard to sort out. And if you get power from your belief and your spirituality, I'm not here arguing with you. I feel like I need to say that because I get in trouble sometimes because I speak like everything I know is a fact. It's not. But please have some understanding for those of us that stand over in the corner and go, Jesus and a buddy have nothing in common.
Well, I want people to, have all the joy and the strength from what you believe in, but I need people to be sure that the shit's laid on the right foundation. You know, you know, so you gotta know why you believe what you believe and what you believe. Is it true? Somebody who I interviewed on the or I'm in the process of doing several interviews with, we're going to be talking about who the fuck actually translates the Bible in the political aspect,
Oh boy.
the financial influence, the political and financial influence on the organizations that are responsible for all the interpretations of the Bible. And so, which is why I always preach for people to learn Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic and translate it yourself. And to make it clear that all of these different translations, however many hundreds of them we have, are done by a group of people with an ulterior motives, and they have a whole different agenda. White, probably white conservative people, but they're not inviting black people, gay people, trans people, everyone to the table to translate the Bible. It's just your group of good old boys and shit like that.
Well, but even the fact that like you're like, great, like let's go back to the Hebrew, the Aramaic. It was an oral tradition. They're not even sure how long it was an oral tradition before they wrote that shit down. Like, and I think talk about sacrilegious. They're stories. They're stories, guys. Like and I think the Bible is a powerful and incredible book and incredible resource. But my agnostic or atheist hat is going to show here for a second when I'm like, so yeah, there was a flood. I'm sure there was. And some dude who was called crazy for probably however long he was building the boat may have built the boat, all that. But the story is there to teach you a lesson, just like every other piece of literature and art is there, whether or not the artist even realizes it, and I mean, the fact of the matter is, you don't even, again, like, you don't even have to peel back the cover that far. Like, the Bible that the majority of people have read is the King James Version. So, you don't think there was a political bent or understanding? Like, King James is like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and release this book that isn't supporting my agenda? Fuck no. He was a smart guy.
Well, smart enough. So what you're saying is like the Noah story, Noah and the ark the flood was probably true, but it may not have covered the whole world. Maybe it didn't go that far. Maybe
Sure.
Nelly time.
Or maybe it did, or maybe it covered the whole world that the person who wrote that story or told it for the first time knew, right? Like, like, let's not forget the fact that, history has been sort of cyclical and, 1,500 years after we think, Jesus was born, people still thought the world was flat. Like have a little historical perspective.
There are still people who think the world is flat.
Yeah, fuck them. I'm sorry. Fuck, yeah. If you're a flat earther, I can't. Well, because that's the perfect example of like, where do you start from there, right? Like, that's exactly Devanden's argument. He's like, if they're coming for me because I'm part of the LGBTQ community, like that's a
Yeah.
non-starter. He's like, I can't explain to them that I deserve to live my life the way I have to. Like, I can't explain that. So that you can't start there. It's like, oh, like, okay, we faked the moon landing. Like, if all that ends up true, I am fine to be on the wrong side of it. I don't believe.
I agree. Like, so if somebody reads the Bible, even if you don't believe every story in there, you could at least take the lessons from it. I don't think everything's in the Bible,
That's
and
it.
but I
Yeah.
believe that you can get like a good idea of how to approach God, and the whole point of it is to lead you to God, and for you to not treat people like shit. So, so where
I-
the whole
Absolutely.
parts of it, it is a guide. That's it. But it's certainly not meant for you to go and control someone else with.
Well, and it's like, again, talking about it even from a historical perspective, notwithstanding that the translations can be good or bad, it's like there's a bunch of slavery and eliminating entire communities and, women subservient to men. It's like, is that the life that you think is enlightened and wonderful and paying homage to the spirit and soul of every person? No. Right. So we don't have to take every letter of the Bible to that. And that's, you're absolutely right. Sort of translating my slightly sacrilegious statement of no, it's they're stories and they're there to instruct and teach, but it doesn't allow us, like, God damn it, like, we're not going to take a bunch of people to the edge of town and stone them. Like, that's not how we should be living as a community.
So if I were to sum up this part of our conversation,
Killing in the name of
to leave the Vannon's audience with my summation, it's a pretty simple and clear message. Don't be a dick.
unless somebody really wants the dick and then be the dick.
That's different. Don't be a dick. I didn't say don't give dick. Two different things.
Very different.
Dick donations go along with it.
And certainly don't lie at a table when you're 5 days old.
Horrendous. And that's honestly what Devannon speaks to. It's like you get
Yeah.
indoctrinated in this shit.
I know.
It's like, maybe I wanted my foreskin.
Well, I certainly didn't want to take it off in front of everybody else. But
Yeah, I think about the amount of it's like people like pick and choose what of the old Hebrew culture like they want. So they want to come for like say gay people, but then they want to have all the lobster and shit that they want, or they want to get circumcised. Which I don't. I wonder how many men running around who are circumcised even know that that was a Hebrew thing. I mean, only their parents bother to explain to them, that this is an ancient Israelite practice that we're doing. You
Well,
know,
so in the United States, it actually essentially got adopted by the medical profession. And, there's a lot of theories as to why it happened. Part of it is a lot of people that were in the medical profession at the turn of the century happened to be Jewish men. And there was this idea of cleanliness. Like there's a lot of reasons, as a Christian who's circumcised was like, I'll never forget when I sorted out that like it didn't have to happen. And I was like, Mom, you let them cut my dick? She was like, they told me that's what we were supposed to do. So I did it. And I was like, but like I was like, Mom, I read the other day that I lose like 40% of like my sexual nerves and feeling when that got cut off. And she was like, is it really not working for you? And I was like, oh, I want to get into that with you, Mom, but yeah. But I mean, literally, and then I, as I was wont to do, I started doing some research, and then you saw all like, genital mutilation through all these different cultures all over the world. And I'm like, God, what is wrong with us?
I knew we'd move in the genital direction at some point during the podcast.
That's clever.
well, shit, a cockatoo will do. We all
I want that T-shirt.
a cockatoo will do.
Cock-a-doodle do, but it's kind of just
Cockatoo, dude, you should make a little like, you should put that on wherever the little tag is in some of the undies. You should have like a just a cockatoo will do. It'd be a fun like little Easter egg that people could find. Easter egg.
I see what you did there. Okay, so
Okay, go ahead.
what we're going to do is I'm gonna have y'all back on again because I want to on the next time I'm gonna get deeper into y'all specific mental health struggles. You mentioned your OCD, Eric.
Yep.
I want to get like into like a really, really deep dive in that. I wanted in the panic attacks and like the dissociative episodes and things like that I was reading about. I want to get very granular with that. And with you, Mark, I want more Catholic fuckery from you.
Happy to talk about Catholic fuckery. And if you wanted to go on a deeper dive into mental health, I'd be happy to share about my own battles with depression, suicidal ideation, with self-esteem issues. Those were my sort of three bigs. Some of it came from the Catholics. I blame them.
Oh yeah, we'll go. I'm happy to get on the whole, what am I? I'm 50 now. 6 months ago, I was finally diagnosed with PTSD related to not physical, but emotional childhood trauma. So yeah, there's a whole story there that I'm more than happy to unpack and be open about and share with your audience. And it's we were on Mark and I were doing a recording a couple of nights ago, and this whole idea kind of came to me as Mark will remember, like we call them, some people have light bulb moments. I have these like chandelier moments, whether it's skiing or mountain biking or when we're doing a show. And
Because his brain has a thick membrane of resistance.
the neuroplasticity is just so incredible, Mark. So and it came to me, I'd been talking so long about the mental health journey and how it's nonlinear and nonlinear and nonlinear. And I'm starting to hear the word nonlinear a lot more. And then it made me think, well, now I'm going back into my geeky finance days and it's got this, nonlinear and it's kind of like an equation. And then it hit me like a ton of light bulbs that it's fluid, right? The mental health journey is fluid. And for me, so much of my life is about trying to be more with the flow, the water element, and a lot of what I've gone through recently in my own journey. And so even things like that, just it continues to evolve how I even look at my own personal journey. So I'm happy to get into that dialogue and go as deep as you want.
Balls deep is what I would.
I will go balls deep.
We'll go balls deep, but we're still going to talk about religion and dicks and Easter eggs.
Hey, they are great bed. They are bedfellows these days, where there is a great amount of everybody's discretion. So the last thing we're going to talk about today, before we begin to wrap it up, is the most recent episode that y'all released on your own podcast. I want to give people a taste of the flavor if this episode hasn't already done it, and I believe that it has. But this episode is important to me because I used to be a model back in the day when I was in Houston, Texas. I was also a model on teen boards here when malls used to have them for Parisians, which is now Macy's, and when I was at high school. And so the modeling industry is a big deal. It touches all of our lives. Because everywhere you look, there's a model somewhere, whether you're walking into Walgreens and you see a makeup model's picture plastered in there, or you're watching a commercial or whatever. Modeling is everywhere. But there's a lot of shit that happened. So y'all had a girl on there. She was talking about her mental health struggles with like bulimia and different stuff like that and getting molested on photo shoots. So speak to me about that episode.
Sure. So it was Danny Chipola. It's episode 59. So she started in the model industry. I'm not going to give the whole episode away, but when she was 17 years old in New York City, and she talks about how very quickly it became a toxic world for her. It was all, she had struggled for a very long time prior to that with self-esteem issues, with body dysmorphia. So you can only imagine when she entered the world of modeling, and she was doing all sorts of, lingerie modeling to, clothing modeling. So the whole spectrum. And so as a girl growing up in New York City and as a teenager dealing with all of those issues, you throw the model industry on top of that. And then she struggled for a very long time bulimia, the toxicity of the overall model environment. She was, sexually assaulted on a model shoot, and she was able to successfully get out of her modeling contract, but her journey continues to this day. She is an avid baseball fan. One of the things that Mark and I connected with her very, very early on is we're huge baseball fans growing up and Red Sox fans, and she's a diehard Yankee fan. And so we had a lot of fun just kind of with that conversation in general. And but I think it really that episode shed light on kind of the stigmas within the stigmas, right? So there's mental health, illnesses and issues in general, but then there are other things, and Devanna, on your episode, right? We talked about how your childhood and all of those issues then became issues that created some of your other mental health issues. And so with Danny, it came down to, she needed to learn how to love herself at the end of the day. And it was something that she had never done before. But by putting herself in what she called this very toxic industry, it actually caused her I'm just going to use the word self-loathing, but it to spiral even deeper down the bulimia, and other mental health issues. And it's taken her quite a while. Her story is unbelievable. She's now created a broadcasting company for women's voices. She has 3 very successful podcasts of her own. And she's an amazing young woman and a very inspirational person. And yeah, I urge everybody to go out and listen to that episode. And I think, as you said so eloquently, and it really does give a very good, overview of what Mark and I are, the message that we're trying to get out there to everybody about our show and about the importance of speaking about these stigmatized and taboo topics.
But one thing I'll tease out of there too that I found so telling about her story, and it has great parallels to yours, even though the mental illness is different, Eric, all too often people that we see that are hyper successful, but in some ways their mental illness is either attached to it or it allows them, right? Like some of your OCD and those things actually helped you be very successful in parts of your life. And the modeling thing was such a sort of perfect metaphor for it, where it's like, you know, she was essentially bulimic to support that career, but she couldn't go so far deep into it that it affected how she looked, except to keep her skinny. As soon as it started to affect her hair, her skin, or her teeth, it was too far. It's like, okay, we'd like you to be sick, but just sick enough that you fit into the box we want you to be in. And I think it's such a powerful metaphor for sort of, and I'm watching Devanna's forehead crinkle. So I think he's like, holy shit, you, you allow this sort of like, we allow this sort of linear aspect of like, oh, well, they're doing this and this, and it allows them to get there. And it's like, well, but long term, like what kind of effects will this have on the person, their mental health, their physical health? And I don't think enough we allow that kind of thought process in a work environment.
Okay. Well, I'm thankful for the models. I hope y'all keep doing it, keep partying, and stand up for yourself. And it's a good life, if you can get into it and that's what you really want to do. It's a shame that someone can't do their art and do their craft without all the bullshit.
Absolutely. Well, and Danny actually has just started. A very good friend of hers that was one of her favorite photographers is actually down in the area she's living in now. And so she actually is starting to do a little bit again. And I can only imagine she'll be coming at it from a healthier, different aspect. And I can't wait to see what she does. She
And I
posted some
yeah,
stuff on Insta the other day that, I mean, just beautiful photos. She's a beautiful lady. And so it's like, yeah, like that's how it has to get done. You're so right, Davina.
and the importance of that, and what you just said, Mark, and Devan, and what you were saying about being able to do your craft. It's being able to do it under your terms. And I know for Danny, that's exactly the road that she's going down now. She's, as Mark said, she's, put up some incredible posts over the past couple of weeks with her photographer friend, and she's doing it on her terms. Mark and I in the things that we're doing now, whether it's, music or sports, I can tell you I'm doing them in a completely different way than I used to. I used to be doing a lot of things for other people, but now I'm doing it on my terms. And so if there's any big takeaway from, let's call it part one of Mark and Erik on sex, drugs, and Jesus, it's do things that make you feel good and help you find joy, but do them on your terms.
Okay. I was going to say any last words from you all. That was a pretty damn good closer, Erik.
Yeah, we could just wrap it up. Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, y'all, this is Erik DaRosa and Marc Fernandes. They will be back again. So strictly speaking, we're not closing this out because it will be continued. Their podcast is From Survivor to Thriver. You can get it wherever you listen to your podcast. They got a Facebook, a TikTok, and an Instagram, and then they are on LinkedIn too. And so goodbye for now, guys. I've enjoyed yet another orgy with you, and we will do it again.
Yes, I can't believe we're gonna have our oh, it's gonna be good luck, right? Because I used to do everything OCD wise in threes, so it's gonna be our third threesome when we do part two of this show.
Well, and if we're gonna go religious, we got the Trinity, baby.
Indeed, we do. Hallelujah, tabernacle, and praise.
Shabbat shalom. It's almost it's Shabbat for somebody right now. In
Yeah, we're getting. Yeah,
it's Friday.
yeah, we're approaching. Maybe I'll sing one of the old hymns for you next time.
Yeah, use one of those fucking guitars. You got 1,000 of them.
One of them's mine. One of them is
them
mine.
is-
And
I could definitely pick one up and play it. If you guys listen to our podcast, the intro and outro music is actually Erik and I playing.
It's beautiful, beautiful, flowy music. So, all right, y'all have a good Friday.
You as well.
yeah,
Much love. Friday the 13th. I mean, it doesn't matter when this airs, but it's Friday the 13th today. And Mercury's in retrograde. Shit's gonna get weird. Be ready.
Stay in your fucking house, people. Thank you all so much for taking time to listen to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. It really means everything to me. Look, if you love the show, you can find more information and resources at sexdrugsandjesus.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Feel free to reach out to me directly at devannon@sexdrugsandjesus.com and on Twitter and Facebook as well. My name is Devannon, and it's been wonderful being your host today. And just remember that everything is going to be all right.